Good morning, everyone. So, this is the fourth lecture in the CSIR Net Life Sciences series. We are still on Unit 2. Earlier, we've covered the cell wall, the rough endoplasmic and the reticulum, and the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Today, we are going to study about the Golgi complex. We'll be dealing with its structure and its function. So, when I say Golgi complex or Golgi apparatus or Golgi bodies, it's all one and the same thing. I might refer to all of these names interchangeably. So Golgi is enclosed in a single membrane. It's a single membrane bound organelle. That is, it contains one lipid bilayer. It was discovered by Camillo Golgi in 1898. It's connected to the nucleus through the ER. Now when I say it's connected to the nucleus, have a look at the figure. Here, can you see the nuclear envelope? This nuclear envelope extends to form the rough endoplasmic reticulum, which further extends to form the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, and in the proximity of the rough and the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, you have the Golgi bodies. Now, Golgi lies in the close proximity to the ER, but it is not physically connected to the ER. It is only connected to the ER and the nucleus through vesicular transport. Several vesicles run between the ER and the Golgi. They carry different materials, different proteins, different cargo, and this is how the ER and the Golgi are connected. Now, proteins are synthesized on the RER surface on the attached ribosomes. These synthesized proteins are then inserted into the RER lumen, where certain modifications take place, and these proteins from the RER cisternae, from the terminal cisternae of the RER, the cisternae which are close to the Golgi bodies, there these proteins are packaged into vesicles, and these vesicles are then transported to the Golgi apparatus. So the proteins are ultimately delivered to the Golgi cisternae. Let's look at the structure of the Golgi complex. It is composed of sac-like structures called the cisternae. Wait, where did my pen go? Yes, it's composed of the sac-like structures called cisternae. Several cisternae get arranged into stacks, and each stack may have 3 to 8 cisternae depending upon the metabolic activity of the cell. So what do I mean by the metabolic activity of the cell? So firstly, this is one cisternae, this is another cisternae, and similarly several other cisternae are arranged parallel to each other. So a set of 3 to 8 cisternae forms what is called as a stack. This is called as a Golgi stack. Now, cells like the goblet cells of the intestine, which have to secrete a lot of mucus, so secretory cells basically, they have a lot of Golgi stacks. A lot of Golgi stacks, and the number of cisternae per stack in these cells is also very high. So this is what I mean when I say that the number of cisternae and the number of stacks depends upon the metabolic activity of the cell. Now, Golgi receives cargo from ER. Cargo means proteins. Processes it means some modifications take place in the Golgi. There can be sulfation of proteins. There can be glycosylation of proteins. So this function of Golgi is really important. It receives the cargo, it processes it, it sorts it. What do you mean by sorting? By sorting, I mean that it selects the materials which have to go to different organelles. So suppose some proteins are meant to be targeted to the lysosome. Those proteins will be sorted in one vesicle. Some proteins which have to be targeted to the plasma membrane, those proteins will be sorted in another vesicle. And finally, this cargo is transported to the various cellular compartments. Now, each Golgi stack, not cisternae, I am talking about stack here. So this is one complete stack. Each Golgi stack has two phases. One is the cis phase, which is towards the ER. So here can you see the cis-Golgi network? So the cis-Golgi network is towards the ER, whereas the trans-Golgi network is away from the ER, or you can say it is towards the plasma membrane. Here this side is the plasma membrane, this side is the endoplasmic reticulum. Now between the cis and the trans-Golgi network lies the medial Golgi network. Whatever cisternae are lying in the middle, they will form a part of the medial Golgi network. Between the ER and the Golgi, mind you, between the ER and the Golgi lies the ergic compartment. What is the ergic compartment? It is nothing but ER-Golgi intermediate compartment. Ergic or ER-Golgi intermediate compartment. The cis-Golgi network receives cargo from ER and the trans-Golgi network delivers it to the plasma membrane. So cargo will come from the ER towards the cis-Golgi network. From the cis-Golgi network, this cargo will travel to the medial Golgi network, and from medial Golgi it will further be transported to the trans-Golgi network, and from the trans-Golgi network the cargo will further move to the plasma membrane or other organelles of the cell. All these phases, they differ in terms of the type of receptors and proteins present. So what do you think? Where will you find more sorting proteins? Obviously in the trans-Golgi network, because final sorting will occur in the trans-Golgi network, right? Now, models of Golgi. It is a very important topic. Models of Golgi here refers to the models of vesicular transport and trafficking that is occurring in the Golgi network or in the cell. So the first model, that is the stationary cisternal model, it states that Golgi is static. Yeah, it states that Golgi is static and the movement of materials between the cisternae is accomplished with the help of vesicles originating from the cis-Golgi network, and these vesicles move towards the trans-Golgi network in something that is called as a anterograde transport. Now, whenever vesicles are originating from the cis-Golgi network, so this side is the cis-Golgi network, this side is the trans-Golgi network. Why is this side the cis-Golgi network? Because it is lying closer to the ER and the ergic. Now vesicles originate from the cis-Golgi network and travel towards the trans-Golgi network. This is how vesicular trafficking takes place according to the stationary cisternal model. When we talk about another model, which is the cisternal maturation model, it states that Golgi is dynamic. Now what do you mean by dynamic here? It says that the cis-Golgi network is formed by the fusion of vesicles coming from the ER. So the ER will release certain vesicles. These vesicles further fuse with one another, and once these vesicles fuse, it forms the cis-Golgi network. Over time, this cis-Golgi network will accumulate certain proteins, certain enzymes, and this cis-Golgi network will further transform into the medial Golgi network. And this medial Golgi network with certain other modifications will then transform into the trans-Golgi network. So, vesicles coming from the ER fuse together to form the cis-Golgi network. The cis-Golgi network further acquires specific enzymes and proteins and transforms to the medial Golgi network, which further transforms to the trans-Golgi network. Now, the trans-Golgi network further cuts off as a vesicle and fuses with the plasma membrane. Imagine, when continuously vesicles are coming from the ER, continuously the cis-Golgi network is being formed. The already existing trans-Golgi network has to go somewhere. It has to disassemble also, so that new trans-Golgi network can be formed. So this already existing trans-Golgi network cuts off as a vesicle. Can you see these vesicles in the figure? It cuts off as a vesicle and fuses with the plasma membrane. And what happens to the enzymes of the trans-Golgi network? The enzymes which this trans-Golgi network already had. These enzymes cannot be transported out of the cell, right? That will be a complete wastage. So the enzymes and the proteins are recycled back to the cis-Golgi network via vesicles. And this transport, wherein the enzymes, the proteins, the vesicles are brought back from the trans-Golgi network towards the ER, this transport is called retrograde transport. Now, the entire Golgi apparatus is compartmentalized. What do I mean by compartmentalized? Different processes occur in the different regions of the stack. Say for example, glycosylation of proteins occurs in the ERGIC. So ERGIC is somewhere here. N-linked glycosylation starts in the ER and it ends in Golgi. Then here, can you see? First attachment of N-acetyl galactosamine to the serine and threonine residues. This is O-linked glycosylation. So all the glycosylation events occur in the ERGIC and the cis-Golgi network. Then the tagging of the lysosomal proteins with mannose-6-phosphate tag. Whatever lysosomal proteins are there in Golgi. I mean, whatever proteins have to be targeted to the lysosome, those proteins have to be tagged with a mannose-6-phosphate tag. That is, whatever mannose is there in those proteins, that mannose is connected to a phosphate group. A phosphate group is attached to the mannose of those proteins, the lysosomal proteins. So that mannose-6-phosphate tagging occurs in the cis-Golgi network and somewhat in the medial Golgi network. Then the attachment of sulfate group to tyrosine residues. Can you see here in the trans-Golgi network? The attachment of sulfate group to tyrosine residues is occurring. That is, sulfation of proteins is occurring in the trans-Golgi network. And the final sorting of proteins occurs in the trans-Golgi network. So, different events and activities occur in different regions of the complex. That is why we say that the Golgi network has a polarity. Now, coming to the functions of Golgi, the first one is the completion of N-linked glycosylation. Remember, we studied N-linked glycosylation in the rough endoplasmic reticulum lecture. In case you want to brush up the N-linked glycosylation, please watch the second video in this playlist, which is on the rough endoplasmic reticulum. I've talked about the N-linked glycosylation there in detail. So, the N-linked glycosylation begins in the RER but is completed in Golgi. Oligosaccharide chain undergoes modifications shortly after it is attached to the nascent polypeptide. And this first modification, that is 3 glucose and 1 mannose removal, occurs in the RER. Here in the figure, can you see these are the 3 glucose residues and one of the mannose residue is removed in the ER itself. When the oligosaccharide moves to the Golgi apparatus, then what happens? So as the glycoprotein from RER passes through the cis and the medial phase of the Golgi network, the oligosaccharide gives rise to 2 types of N-linked oligosaccharide chains. So in cis and medial Golgi, the oligosaccharide is modified in 2 ways. It can be modified in any of the 2 ways. And due to these 2 different modifications, we get 2 different N-linked oligosaccharide chains. One is called the complex oligosaccharide and the other is called the high mannose oligosaccharide. Now, what do you mean by the high mannose oligosaccharide? It is nothing but the original oligosaccharide which was coming from the ER with no new sugars added to them in the Golgi apparatus. So if the N-linked oligosaccharide coming from the RER remains as such in Golgi, it is called the high mannose oligosaccharide because it has a lot of mannose residues attached to it. Whereas most of the mannose residues are removed from the complex oligosaccharide. So if the initially modified N-linked oligosaccharide which is coming from the RER, if it undergoes removal of mannose residues, then we get something called as a complex oligosaccharide. And to this complex oligosaccharide, a lot of other sugars are added in a sequential manner. And these sugars are added with the help of glycosyl transferases. If you break the word into two, glycosyl means a sugar, transferases means something that is transferring the sugar to a substrate. So glycosyl transferases are the enzymes which are responsible for glycosylation. The glycosylation events in Golgi, in contrast to those in ER, can be highly variable, leading to high variability in the carbohydrate domains of the particular glycoprotein. So this is how we obtain variability in different proteins. Say lysosomal proteins will be glycosylated in different manner, the plasma membrane proteins will be glycosylated in a different manner, and so on. Here, this figure shows nothing but whatever I have explained till now. Cis Golgi, alpha manosidase is acting where it removes the mannose residues. Then N-acetyl glucosamine transferase is acting and it is adding one N-acetyl glucosamine residue to the N-linked oligosaccharide. Then again, alpha manosidase 2 is acting and removing two more mannose residues. Again, N-linked glucosamine transferase 2 is acting and adding another N-linked N-acetyl glucosamine to the oligosaccharide. Then there are certain other glycosyl transferases like the fucosyl transferase or the galactosyl transferase which act fucose, galactose respectively. There may be sialyl transferase which may be responsible for the addition of sialic acid residues. So this is how the completion of the N-linked glycosylation takes place and we get the final N-linked oligosaccharide protein. N-linked glycosylated protein. Now the second function of the Golgi apparatus is glycolipid and sphingomyelin synthesis. I should say that the function is the completion of the glycolipid and sphingomyelin synthesis that initially started in the SER. So the synthesis of glycolipid and sphingomyelin, glycolipid or various other lipids starts in the SER and it is just completed in the Golgi apparatus. A precursor of lipids is called ceramide and this ceramide is the molecule which is synthesized by SER. Now this ceramide which is synthesized in the SER is either converted to sphingomyelin or to other glycolipids in the Golgi complex. How this conversion is occurring, how ceramide is converted to sphingomyelin or glycolipids is beyond the scope of the syllabus. Now, the third and very important function of Golgi bodies is O-linked glycosylation. Some proteins undergo O-linked glycosylation and some proteins they undergo N-linked glycosylation. So N-linked glycosylation of proteins begins in the RER, I already told you, and ends in the Golgi. But the O-linked glycosylation starts and ends both in the Golgi apparatus. So it is beginning and ending both in Golgi. In O-linked glycosylation, why is it called O-linked and why is N-linked called N-linked? For the answer to why N-linked is called N-linked, you have to go to the previous lecture in this playlist. Why O-linked is called O-linked glycosylation, I'm just going to tell you. It is called so because the oligosaccharide chain is linked to the hydroxyl group, the OH group of serine or threonine via an N-acetyl galactosamine. So there might be a lot of serine and threonine residues in a protein. To the hydroxyl groups of these serine and threonine residues or both, an oligosaccharide chain is linked and this is what is called as O-linked glycosylation. O-linked oligosaccharides are usually short and contain 1 to 4 sugar residues. These are also linked to one another by glycosyl transferases. The complete process occurs in Golgi, I already told you. Now, how does a protein know whether it has to be retained in ER or transported to Golgi? We kept on studying the transport of proteins between ER and Golgi, right? If all the ER proteins reach the Golgi, ER will be left empty, right? So how does the protein know whether it has to be retained in ER or transported to Golgi? So there are certain specific tags that are present on the polypeptides which provide information on whether the polypeptides are destined to be a part of the ER or they have to be transported to the Golgi network. So these tags can be short amino acid sequences, or they can be oligosaccharide chains, they can be single carbohydrate moieties, or they can be hydrophobic domains on the polypeptide chain. So there are two types of such tags. One is called the retention tag and the other is called the retrieval tag. Now what is the retention tag? Retention tags assure that the protein doesn't leave the ER lumen until it folds properly. So retention tag in proteins ensure that they are retained in the ER lumen until the proper folding of the protein occurs. Packaging and delivery of misfolded proteins to target organelles may cause irreparable damages to the cell, as in case of CFTR, which is I'll just check the full form and let you know. Now, let's study what retention tags are. So retention tags ensure that the protein doesn't leave the ER lumen until proper folding of the protein occurs. So until the protein folds properly under the influence of the chaperones present in the RER, these proteins will not leave the ER. These proteins may or may not be ER specific proteins. So you know that the packaging and delivery of misfolded proteins, if that occurs, it causes irreparable damages to the cell. So we do not want misfolded or unfolded proteins to leave the RER. We want them to be degraded. So these retention tags serve this purpose. They do not allow the protein to leave the ER until and unless the proteins are folded properly with the help of the chaperones. For example, a protein called the NMDA receptor contains a small twin arginine RXR ER retention motif. RXR here is arginine, X is any amino acid and R is again arginine. So therefore twin arginine. It contains an RXR ER retention motif that regulates its forward trafficking. So once this protein NMDA is folded properly, the retention tag that is present on the protein will be masked within the folds of the protein, and the protein is targeted to the plasma membrane. Now let's understand retrieval tag. Proteins destined to remain in the ER, whether they are luminal proteins of the ER or they are membranous proteins of the ER, these proteins which have to reside in the ER, they contain short amino acid sequences that ensure their return to the ER. In order to return these proteins to the ER, something has to be sensed on these proteins, right? How will you know which proteins to be returned to the ER? Which are ER specific proteins? So there are specific sequences on the ER specific proteins, whether they are luminal proteins or they are membranous ER proteins. These sequences are called retrieval tags. And due to these tags, these proteins are always recycled back to the ER. Now, the integral membrane proteins of the ER have C-terminal tag, which is the KKXX tag. That is lysine XX tag. X is any amino acid. This KKXX tag occurs in mammals that facilitates their retrieval through the COP1 coated vesicles. So the vesicles which travel from the Golgi network to the ER through retrograde transport. Remember, we studied retrograde in a few slides back. So the vesicles that are transported from the trans-Golgi network towards the ER, or from the cis-Golgi network towards the ER, basically from Golgi to ER, they are coated with a coat protein called COP1. So these COP1 coated vesicles bring back these ER specific proteins to the ER. Whereas the soluble proteins of the ER lumen, So the integral membrane proteins of the ER have KKXX tag, but the soluble proteins of the ER lumen possess a KDEL retrieval signal. The KDEL receptor shuffles between the ER and Golgi. It recognizes these proteins and it retrieves them to the ER via, again, the COP1 coated vesicles. So both the membranous as well as the luminal proteins of the ER are brought back. Now, we move on to the last function of the Golgi bodies, which forms the basis of the entire vesicular transport, that is protein sorting. Now, sorting occurs at the trans-Golgi network. Sorting of proteins is a very important function of Golgi. There are three ways which may be followed by proteins at the trans-Golgi network. First is the constitutive secretory pathway. What does this mean? It means that in this pathway, whatever proteins follow this pathway, they are continually discharged outside the cell. So a continuous discharge of proteins outside the cell is through something called as the constitutive secretory pathway. Constitutive here means continuous. The examples of such proteins are albumin and mucus. The second pathway which may be followed by the proteins at the trans-Golgi network is the regulated secretory pathway. Now, in regulated secretory pathway, controlled secretion of materials occurs outside the cell, usually in response to various stimuli. So, a stimulus will come outside the cell, it will bind to cell surface receptors. This will trigger a signal cascade, and through the regulated secretory pathway, the proteins will be sent out of the cell. For example, neurotransmitter release in response to calcium levels. Proteins are packaged into vesicles formed from the trans-Golgi network. Now, these vesicles will fuse with the plasma membrane in response to the external signals, and this is how these proteins will be delivered outside the cell. So, examples are neurotransmitters and insulin. This is a recap of the constitutive as well as the regulated secretory pathway. In constitutive secretory pathway, continual and unregulated discharge of materials occurs from the cell. And in regulated secretory pathway, the discharge of products stored in cytoplasmic granules requires appropriate stimulus. And this stimulus is sensed by cell surface receptors. Here can you see this vesicle here, it fuses with the plasma membrane in a constitutive way. I mean, continuously the materials are delivered outside the cell in absence of any stimulus. Whereas here, a signal comes which is catched by the receptor. This black thing here is the receptor. The red one is the stimulus or the signal, such as a hormone or a neurotransmitter. This receptor further initiates a signal cascade which is conveyed to the trans-Golgi network, and from the trans-Golgi network, these vesicles carrying the cargo are fused with the plasma membrane, and the cargo is delivered outside the cell. Now, last but not the least, for the formation of transport vesicles in a cell, there is a need for an assistance which is provided by certain proteins. These proteins are called coat proteins. So coat proteins actually drive the formation of the vesicles. There are three types of coat proteins. The first one is COP1, which we just discussed about. It is responsible for retrograde transport of vesicles, that is vesicles from Golgi to ER or from Ergic to ER. Okay, Golgi to Ergic, Ergic to ER, or directly Golgi to ER. This is called the retrograde transport. This is assisted by another protein which is also called as an adapter protein, and the adapter in case of COP1 is ARF1 GTPase. Understand it in this way, that when a vesicle forms, some coat proteins have to assemble outside the vesicle. And what brings these coat proteins onto the vesicle? an adapter protein brings these coat proteins onto the vesicle. So the adapter protein which recruits COP1 coat protein is called ARF1 GTPase. Why is it called the GTPase? Because it is dependent upon GTP hydrolysis. The COP1 protein is a coat protein for retrograde transport, that is transport from trans-Golgi network to cis-Golgi network, from Golgi to ERGIC, from ERGIC to ER. I hope this is clear. Next coat protein is the COP2 coat protein, which is responsible for anterograde transport. Anterograde means forward direction, whereas retrograde means reverse direction. So it transports materials from the ER to ERGIC or Golgi, from ER to ERGIC or ER to Golgi or ERGIC to Golgi. It transports material from the Golgi to the plasma membrane. And the adapter protein which is involved here is the SAR GTPase. Again, SAR is the adapter protein and GTPase because it is dependent upon the GTP hydrolysis activity. There is a third type of coat protein which is called clathrin. It assists in the delivery of proteins from the trans-Golgi network to lysosomes. We are going to study about this coat protein in the next lecture, where we will be talking about endocytosis and vesicle fusion. So this was all for today's lecture. Next lecture will be all about vesicle fusion, intracellular vesicular transport, endocytosis, exocytosis and so on. Keep watching Utkalp Digital Classes. Please subscribe to our channel for latest lectures on the Life Sciences, CSIR Net Life Sciences series. I am your mentor Richa, and goodbye till I come back for the next lecture.